Today is Tuesday, February 15th, in the Hannah City Village Council meeting. If you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. I don't. Can we create a quick yes sheet? It's right here. Oh, we got it right there. Let me send it this way. Yeah. Officially. Any public input? Nobody online. Nobody online. Okay. Discussion of potential purchase of the rail line for the Hannah City Trail. We're going you, Brad. Who's doing that?
I think, well, first, I guess I could start. We had, in your package, you've got a variety of things. You've got a statement of willingness to assume financial responsibility, which is what I had sent you guys online that you looked at. You all said that we were okay with moving forward. We just need to ratify that with a vote tonight. I've also got an update on the partners' reaction to general intergovernmental agreement. There's a sample copy of what Jonathan put together, what would be included in the intergovernmental agreement in the packet. And Fred can give us an update on his discussions, if any, with our two partners. I've also got some information on the possible extension with the Service Transportation Board, and I've asked Jonathan to speak to that. We've got the Farnsworth Trail environmental proposal with pricing, and Brandon can speak to that. And then I did go ahead and put the purchase agreement, which is in the packet as well. It's the big document with Union Pacific that we could vote on tonight if we want to, but I felt like we needed to talk about all the other things first before we got to a point of deciding whether or not that's something we wanted to vote on or not. So with that, I guess, are there any questions on the statement of willingness to assume financial responsibility? Or Jonathan, did you want to speak to that at all?
I can just advise that it was filed on the STP's website on February 9th and has been served in accordance with the certificate of service that was attached. Again, this is the, as our expert counsel put it, the ticket to the dance, not a commitment to go into the dance or even to dance at all. So this was sort of a required prerequisite before we could be heard further on the trail project.
So you guys had all seen a copy of that, and you responded that you wanted to move forward. So we just scheduled a ratification vote of that agreement tonight.
Now, do they have, how long there's a certain time period that they have to say yay or nay to that?
There's not really, as far as I could tell, any sort of response that happens to this. Somebody could file an objection, I suppose, but I haven't seen anything filed. This is the precursor to the motion that we would be filing soon if we proceed.
So since we've already had this taken care of, we need to ratify this vote. So I will entertain a motion to authorize me to sign the state of willingness to assume financial responsibility.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Pearson, second by Sidak. Any further discussion? Roll call. Johnson?
Yes.
Sidak?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
And Tony, I think you're going to have to vote since there's only 4 of you.
You don't have to, I don't think.
We
We only have 4 trustees holding office. So the quorum would be 2 plus Tony. So I thought he has a right to vote, but no obligation.
I authorize myself to sign.
I'm glad you.
All right, so next we sent a potential intergovernmental agreement or some bullet points of what it might be included in an intergovernmental agreement to Farmington and to Peoria County. I know Fred's had some basic conversations with them as to where they would stand. The big questions are they willing to, for me, the big questions are they willing to go full support up front on the purchase, not even if the purchase is lower, so that we have some maybe additional funds to do something with. Are they willing to take on a shared liability afterwards? Are they willing to take on a basic level of maintenance for the trail after the purchase? I don't think we have clear answers from them at this point. I don't know, Janaki, Fred, if you have things to add.
I can just give a little context. So after the last meeting 2 weeks ago, the next day in the snowstorm, I went ahead and sent this outline along with what was then the draft of the UP agreement to Sharon Williams and to Kent Cowell at Village of Farmington. I haven't heard anything back from the county. I did receive a voicemail from Kent about a week ago saying that they'd retained an attorney to advise them at Farmington about the package and that I'd be hearing from him. I have not heard from him yet. My intention is that depending on what we do today, I will follow up with them tomorrow and just give them an update and kind of lean on them a little bit to get moving.
Yeah, Mayor Colwell reached out to me prior to their council meeting. I think it was on the 7th, Monday was there. And, you know, his questions were basically, we had all agreed up front that if we had to pay the max, this is what it would cost each community. I think for Farmington, it was like $111,000. For us, it was like $113,000 for Hannah City, and I forget what Peoria County's portion was. And so we had talked about if everyone would just commit that amount, even if we don't spend that much for the railroad, they would commit to their 20% of the 2.8%, whatever that was, then that would at least give us some money to at least begin signage and putting up some barricades along the rail and signage of areas that we don't want people to be on and things like that. And in his email, he was wanting that figure, what that would be, so I gave that to him. And then he was also wanting a figure as what were we looking for as far as a yearly maintenance. And going back through taking a budget from another similar trails program, I said really about $30,000 is what would be ideal, $25,000 to $30,000. So each community's chipping in about $10,000 a year. So I think that's kind of what he presented to his board. I reached out to him today. I'm not sure if he's in town or not, but I not heard a response on how the meeting went or if there was pushback or not. But that's kind of the conversation that I had with him also.
I would, just to chip in, I would say it's pretty likely if you talked to him early last week that he called me after that. I don't have the exact date when he called, written down, ratified moving forward with council. I would point out, just as we discussed last time, that to me the real critical issues in the intergovernmental agreement are that Farmington and Peoria County will be jointly liable with Hannah City for the indemnity and all just ongoing maintenance operations expenses, not the sort of fun gratuitous stuff, in a little park here and there, but the basic maintenance and operation and security safety issues on the line. And there definitely will be issues. I mean, we know about Travola having the problem with the runoff. There will be issues that come up. So getting their commitment ahead of time, I think, is pretty critical to moving forward. So that's where we were.
So
last time.
Janaki, quick question, process question.
Mhm.
As we go through all of these updates, eventually we're going to get to the place where we're either going to vote to sign the Union Pacific agreement or not. If we vote to sign it, are we now bound to buy the property?
No. So, and we will go through that when we get into the agreement. I would like to flip through it. If there's a maybe
For me, I just want to make sure it's clear that that the board knows that if they're what they're voting on and why they're voting on it. And do we still have time to hear from the partners before we're bound? Okay.
And well, I'll give you here preview. So is one of the things we've done is extended the due diligence period in the UP agreement into late June. So as you can tell, when we talk about the STB extension in a minute, we're going to need that. But we've pushed the due diligence deadline into mid-June. And one of the conditions to closing is that we have an intergovernmental agreement with Peoria County and Farmington that is satisfactory to us in our sole discretion. So unless we end up with them where we want to be, we have no obligation to proceed.
So in the agreement is if there's no extension, it's dead.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no partner agreement, we have the choice.
Correct.
To kill it.
Yeah, and I mean technically, if there was no extension and you all decided to just run for luck and go for it without doing any due diligence, you could still close by March 30th. The UP would be fine with that. They wouldn't mind that at all. But obviously, you'd have to lock me out of the room to do that. But no, so that is there, and there are a few other conditions that I think we'll go through when we get to that point.
So speaking of the extension, can you walk us through what we've done in that regard?
Yeah. So if we
and there's
the
stuff
page,
in your packet in regard to that.
So the next page, and this is an earlier draft. It's a living document so far. It's called a motion for issuance of a substitute notice of interim trail use, or NITU, as they say, and a motion for adjustment of the substitute NITU negotiation period. This is a draft of what we would file before the STB. We don't need to actually have completed negotiations and signed the UP contract to file this. However, it is more likely that we get what we're asking for if we have signed with UP. So these issues all sort of, it's hard. There's not an order of operations here that's real clear. Things kind of have to happen simultaneously in parallel rather than in sequence. So what we're seeking in this document, as we already discussed, we filed the statement of willingness. So people are on notice that we're around. Here's Hannah City. The motion for issuance of the substitute NITU asks that the original notice of interim trail use that was approved for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources back in 2008 be converted to us, to Hannah City. So Hannah City will be the new holder of the NITU. In order to get the substitute NITU approved, we need to have UP on board as the railroad, and we need to have Illinois Department of Natural Resources on board. UP, as of Friday, has approved and conceded this document. The folks
say that again. They believe the extension is necessary.
Yes, and they will support our motion for substitute NITU and extension.
Okay.
The extension we're seeking here is to the end of the year to leave a margin. And frankly, if the STB says, well, we don't want to give you the whole thing, we'll give you 6 months. Okay. I mean, and this was sort of in consultation with the IDNR. So I've been talking to the attorneys at IDNR, including the attorney who filed for the prior extension. And she really wanted to push it even beyond the end of the year. I said, end of the year is plenty. If we can't get it done by then, we're not going to. We'll just say that. The closing date that we're proposing in the existing UP agreement is end of June 30th. And frankly, things happen. Those dates can push, so we thought it was more prudent to ask for the full calendar year. So she is running through, she being the attorney for IDNR, is running through the last few hoops on her end. The office was closed on Friday. She was out yesterday. She's tracking it down and hopes to have an approval to me by tomorrow. And she said, you know, it would help if I could tell her that we've signed the UP contract. That'll really help her put the pressure on people she needs to put pressure on internally to get done what needs to get done. But in any case, she says, obviously we have no real argument with this. I mean, we're not going to be able to get this project done. So if you can, that's terrific. They're in favor. So what we're seeking then is the substitute need to, which is we step into the IDNR shoes, and we're seeking this extension. Now, as you all might remember from the last extension, the STB pretty much said, don't come asking again to IDNR. I mean, and here we are asking again. Well, we're making some distinctions here. First off, IDNR sat on this since 2008. We've just been on the scene for like a month. We're doing everything as fast as we can. We may be in a position to say that we actually have a signed contract with UP, but even if we aren't after today, we can say we've got everything but the signature on a contract with UP, which is much farther, obviously, than IDNR ever got. We have our grant is approved. We're ready to go. We just have a few conditions that we need to satisfy, some contingencies that need to be satisfied. The other sort of interesting point, and I can't remember if we really talked about this 2 weeks ago, is that Fred discovered that he received a call from somebody along the line who owned a reversionary interest, who owned some underlying property rights of the line. Yeah, who said, oh, well, you know, I've already gotten paid for my piece of the line. And this was years ago.
A couple years ago, yeah.
So Fred thankfully managed to track down something that had a case number on it. So we've reviewed, it appears that back in 2013, an attorney group representing a class action of all the property owners along the line, the whole 24 miles, filed a lawsuit in the Federal Court of Claims seeking compensation for the taking of their property. So, and the way it works is once the NITU was issued in 2008, that gave them the right to go to the federal government and say, well, you are now taking my property, my reversionary right in this property, and you've designated it for trail use. Well, I hadn't given it to the railroad for trail use. That's you people doing it. That's you, government. You're the one who passed this law. So I deserve compensation because you're really extinguishing my rights to reversion of that property. And this is a well-known mechanism. This is what happens with these trail use programs. So this was filed back in 2013. It wended its way through the Federal Court of Claims, and just at the end of last year, so in December, the court finally completed its rulings on summary judgment and whatnot and disposed of the case. So some of the unhappy property owners, or would-be property owners, are appealing now. But I think as far as we're concerned, we can tell the STB, hey, anybody who would have a gripe about this extension because they want their reversionary interests to kick in, well, they've already been satisfied. Either the federal court has either found that they had a right and they've been paid, I believe, and there were settlements with a lot of people too. That's probably the gentleman you spoke to. They've either been paid by the feds already for their interest, or the court has determined that they don't have an interest and they're on appeal, and they've been vindicated. So that is, I think, an excellent basis to say that we should get an extension. Nobody is harmed by this. UP's on board. They're going to speak in favor of this. IDNR would like it to happen. And frankly, the folks underlying have no remaining rights as far as I can tell. I did actually have a very cryptic conversation with an attorney from the DOJ, from the Department of Justice, who was the attorney on the case. And he wasn't there at the beginning. He's only been on the file for a year, so he was a little bit vague about what had happened to that point. But I asked him the question. I said, well, what is going to happen? Because I started poking around. What happens if the NITU goes away, if it expires without trail use being approved, being finalized? Do these folks have to give the money back? I mean, what happens? And he said, well, that is very complicated and I cannot answer that question. I said, well, okay, I'm glad I didn't look that hard then.
I think the other point of this is the last several extensions that were filed with the STB. There is an organization that is affiliated with the reversionary property rights. They have opposed our last several extensions. And
Which group's that?
it's
NARPO. It's National
NARPO.
Association of Reversionary Property
Oh,
Owners, I
It's a
think.
new one for me.
Yeah. Me too.
NARPO. And so if there are no reversionary, they
Yeah.
really have no
They have no
legal
standing.
standing
So
to oppose.
who exactly appealed? People with obvious reversionary rights that don't want
Well,
the compensation and they want the ground, or people with not obvious reversionary rights that are saying
Yeah.
we do have some?
People who, at my understanding from just, I didn't want to review every document for the last 18, or last 9 years. It looks like it's people who the court determined did not have reversionary
Okay.
interests. So
So nobody's saying leave your compensation behind. I want my ground back, like the original agreement said.
they really can't.
Oh, they
It's a
can't, okay.
taking. I mean, it's eminent domain. Effectively, it's like an eminent domain.
Oh, okay.
So it's really just a question of how much, not if.
Yeah.
And so these are folks who the court found didn't have a reversionary property interest or had waived it or whatnot.
The lore of reversionary rights is a lot greater than the actual reality of it. Everybody you talk to that owns on the railroad says their grandpa told them they get that ground back when it goes away.
Yeah.
Even if you show them a deed where they literally sold it to them fee simple, it's
Yeah. Though finding the deed is not so easy always. So I actually have another case going on with this in my office right now where nobody can find the original document and the recorder's office is no help.
oh, it's not going to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. So what we're going to do is, as soon as the IDNR gets back to me, we'll be in a position to file this motion. It might be amended somewhat depending on what happens today, but some version of this motion I will be filing within a day or two, probably. And I don't really need you all to sign anything else for this. I'm going to attach your statement of willingness that was already prepared. So as long as I've got the sort of go-ahead from the group, I will proceed with that. So we could turn then to the Farnsworth is the next item in the packet. So Farnsworth did come back with the proposal. They're thinking it'd take about 5 weeks, so let's say 6 to 7 to actually complete the work that they're proposing, assuming everything goes well. And of course, we've got another snowstorm coming in 2 days, so that's going to push us back. So this is why we need time. The cost that's estimated is $16,000, and again, it would behoove everyone in this room if we could get the county and the village to agree to fund part of this, even if we haven't finished the intergovernmental agreement at the time we start this project, just to offset some of the cost if we decide we need to start moving in parallel. Now, obviously, those environmental issues that we're having with the snow are going to be less as time goes on, and if we do get an extension to the end of June, we should have a couple clear months there to complete the project. So we don't necessarily need to.
I've got a call into IDNR in reference to if this would be included in the grant. I mean, this could be included in, because the grant is for the purchase of the property. Well, part of the purchase of the property is doing our due diligence.
And it is
If not, though,
clear.
it's, and I that's great, I hope it is, but if it's not, you all need to understand that the legal costs that we've paid for so far through Janicki and their firm, and if we went forward with the Farnsworth stuff, currently all rests with the Village of Hannah City.
And that's why I'm loath to have you go forward without a commitment for cost sharing.
In terms of timing, can we wait to know whether the extension happens before we pull the trigger on the environmental?
Well, I will tell you that our expert advisor on this, Charles,
He wants everything done right
he wanted
now.
everything done a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I understand where he's coming from completely. And I don't know if we want to wait too long, but again, if we get that outside closing date set, then that takes a lot of the pressure off. I think we need to push Peoria and Farmington. I think they're going to end up being more of a barrier to getting this process started than Farnsworth will be, or even, really any of the other external factors.
So Charles's point is he's driving us towards us closing independently without an extension. And so the question for this board, I think, is if we don't get the extension, are we going to close independently? And if yes, then we ought to move forward with the environmental. And if not, we should wait for the extension and then do the environment. Have I misstated that at all?
No, you haven't. The only downside with waiting, and it's a gamble here. It's a $16,000 gamble.
Yep.
That the village may end up eating is if we don't approve this $16,000 to move forward on the environmental, you're pushing this back now. Peoria County is going to take 2 months to give us a final offer. They meet once a month. They haven't even brought it to their committee yet to discuss this. So it's going to be 2 months before we get a final from Peoria County. Farmington, we might get an answer the first Monday in March. But now you've pushed this out till March before Farnsworth can get started. And then you got another 5 weeks. Hitting our June deadline for closing is going to be even that much harder to hit. And that's kind of been the whole process, what has pushed this out for so many years. It's because we've always kind of waited until we had everything in a row to move forward. So
we don't even have an extension from.
Right.
This may all be a moot point. They may put a bullet in its head in 2 days.
Do we have any idea on the timing of the extension?
No, we can ask them to rule fast. And we're going to ask them to rule in 7 days from whenever I file. But they don't really have to. I mean, the fact that we have UP lined up and we've got IDNR, we will have IDNR lined up at the time we do the filing, that will help. Technically, I believe there is a provision where objectors are supposed to be given 20 days to respond. So, I mean, this is already Crunchville from that perspective.
So, yeah, I mean, it could be over a month before we hear back from the STB whether or not they have granted our extension, which is going to put us right at the end of our extension period. Because
the end of our existing period.
Our existing March 30th, 2022 here time frame. Because technically they have to allow a 20-day period for people to object to it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, though, the question still remains for this board is if we don't get the extension, if we don't get the agreement, and you want to close by the original date, then pull the trigger and have Farnsworth do their work and do it as fast as they can, right? If those are risks that you want to wait on, and we don't get them, then it's dead, right? And if we do get them, we have time.
They're not going to get this done before March 30th, no matter what, unless he starts a week ago.
Well,
Or
You think?
Yes, I mean, we
So you
3
can
weeks
do-
to complete the work and 2 weeks to write it up, and I can commit to that.
Yeah.
Weather dependent.
that's what I mean. that's nice thought.
It might be muddy and sloppy, and we get right in there. You would offer some ATVs to help us out.
I got one person that would give us would
Okay,
drive us around in a UTV on as far as they could.
but not to get into the weeds, but yeah, we get 5 inches of snow Thursday, but it's supposed to be 50 on next Monday. So it might be messy and sloppy, but
Yeah.
we've got to do a database search first. I think we can find a window in 3 weeks to spend a day out there doing it and write it up. So yeah, I can commit to the 5-week schedule we had.
26 miles a day would be impressive on the ATV looking at everything. Yeah.
Well, you have fun with that.
You take his bike on it.
Yeah, no, we spent a lot of time thinking that through, recognizing that time was of the essence here. With the understanding that we could spend 2 years out there
Oh,
looking
sure.
for trouble.
Oh, yeah.
This is a limited reconnaissance, looking for big red flags, and trying to help you assess what's out there as well to some degree. It's not going to be comprehensive, but hey, here's a bridge and it's falling down.
Yeah.
And there's not a structural assessment, but bridge pin here,
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't want to be the reason this doesn't happen.
And I'm going to note that there's actually another issue that I'll probably be calling you about. Before we'd close, we'd want to get all the PIN numbers, which I'm trying to get them to put directly into the contract.
And the counties aren't right on what they show on their stuff.
Yeah,
For sure.
and we're going to need to line up those pins at least as best we can, and then line up the once we get that from UP. They didn't want to send this to us until we signed, which was odd to me.
They
This
didn't
is
send
a-
us the schedule of.
This is the list of the
Oh,
known licenses. So
Yeah.
this is all your easements and your crossings.
they're licenses, right? Because they're attached to an individual
Yeah.
or an
it's-
individual entity.
it's-
They
yeah,
don't
I've
transfer
got
with the
some
land.
more. I've got a couple copies here. If you want, State of Illinois limestone, Farmington, Trevolo Sanitary District, power companies, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So part of the exercise will be looking at all those pins, lining them up, and then seeing where these licenses are to make sure that it doesn't cause real problems for the use of the line going forward. So that's another due diligence item that we're going to talk. Well, we can
So
talk
they
about
didn't
it now.
give, they didn't give anything location. They just gave this schedule of this list of
It says what county and city it's near.
yeah.
So that doesn't really do too much for us.
Well, that's Henry Pratt Company, Dixon, Illinois, Lee County. That's an odd one.
Yeah, who knows?
A lot of these are, because we've had to get them from the UP before, when we ran a water line underneath the railroad.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we had to get a
I bet you got
license.
two of them.
License to do that. Sewer line, we had to get a license for that. So that's what a lot of these are things where people have run something under the railroad. So it might be a phone company, might be a utility company, might be a village or a township or something.
Yeah, it's mostly crossing, pipeline,
Yeah, but
warning devices.
there's no location.
Not
It would
on
be nice to have it when you're walking
There's,
down.
I mean, they
Well,
have it. The railroad
they have
knows.
it.
Yeah.
So they have the documents
They
underlying
have these
each of these items,
Not yet.
but they haven't sent them to
Okay.
me yet.
Yeah, that would be helpful to have to walk out there.
We're
That's a
gonna need
maintenance
it.
issue. Yeah.
He said as soon as we sign.
Now, how up to date do they stand on these? Because, like, the ones that are under individual names, because these are licenses. Usually railroads give licenses to cross.
Correct.
So they're not an easement. They're not traveling with the property. They're traveling with the individual. So if some of these individuals if these are 80-year-old licenses and that person's gone, do they keep track of which of these
Oh,
are
I
still with
doubt
a
it.
living
No.
person?
I would assume that.
So
these
some
are-
of these names, some of these people could have been dead 40 years.
they might
and
very well have been extinguished.
there's still probably going to be a pipeline there for a house if that's what it was for, a wire for a house that maybe is not a current license technically because the
Oh,
owner's
absolutely. They might be extinguished. They might have been abandoned.
dead. Yeah.
Nobody's keeping
Or may not have a
track.
valid license holder because the person's deceased and it never was.
Yep.
Nobody ever thought to go back and have the,
Yep.
whoever bought the property next get their own license.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we'd be buying it kit and caboodle with whatever whatever that means. So at least we know where it was. And this is be part of the project for Farnsworth, and from a surveying, or it's not really traditional surveying, but
No.
a laying out perspective, figuring out what's where, and looking for particular issues. This is all part of the project and due diligence.
Yeah, without some of these you can guess on, but without them giving us at least a mile marker or something. I mean, because they're pretty easy to, road crossing, stuff like that, you're going to kind of know, okay, this is what it is, but.
So jumping forward to closing, if we found something on that list that we didn't like, we could back out.
Yes, this is all going to be part of the due diligence, the feasibility studies, all of that.
And if you had a chance to look at the purchase agreement, Donahue done a great job of protecting the city's interest in giving us outs as we move forward here.
So if we'd like to flip to the purchase agreement now, and we can just go through it and then double back and talk some more about Farnsworth, the proposal. So the purchase and sale agreement, things to notice, and I'm just going to hit the high points here. Sort of it's very similar to what you saw last time 2 weeks ago. I'll just hit some of the points again. So section 4, section 2 is the purchase price. We all have seen that. Section 4, which is compliance with the Trails Act. The railroad retains a right to repurchase the property in the future for reactivation for rail use. That is the entire precedent of doing the rails to trails. It's the way that the federal government is continuing to exert control over the line so that we can get the line without having to worry about state law, reversionary property rights, abandonment issues, all of that. So this is required for the Rails to Trails program. If they do come back sometime in the future and rebuy the line, they do have an obligation to pay fair market value, including improvements. So, and that's part of the deal. Okay, section 5 is conditions precedent to sale. The first one that's really relevant is on page 3, but it's the little Romanet 3 at the top, A3. Trails use decision. In the event that the trail use decision terminates, the agreement shall be without any further force in effect and without further obligation of either party to the other. So if our STB deadline passes without closing on the property, on the sale, then it just terminates automatically. D, feasibility studies. As you'll see, we now have execution through June 10th is the feasibility review period. It includes, this is our opportunity to get in there and muck around and see what's going on for Farnsworth.
2022.
Oh, thank you. 2022, good catch.
Did that.
Wow, look at that.
I wrote that circle that didn't even notice.
I highlighted the date just a moment just before coming over and didn't even see it. So sure enough, well, not so much last year as this coming year, we'll have an opportunity to do whatever sampling, whatever feasibility studies we need to do. There are some fences about how we're allowed to access the property. If we ruin something, we have an obligation to go back in and fix it and so on. Continuing on, page 5E, subdivision approval. This is sort of the if we need to do anything to convey the properties, i.e. if the pins are not pins or aren't accurate, then it's up to us to figure out how to do the subdivisions and whatnot. I mean, hopefully, since we're with the county on this, that's not going to be an issue. I'm hoping that the pins are at least moderately accurate to the point where we can put together something that's recordable. So hopefully we can get into that. And I have the licenses as a starred item on this too, just to synchronize all those together. H on this page, intergovernmental approval agreement. This is the condition that we discussed earlier. As a condition precedent to closing and prior to the expiration of the feasibility review period, we execute a 3-party intergovernmental agreement on form acceptable to buyer, that's us, in its sole discretion with respect to the operation and maintenance of the property after closing. And that's critical because, of course, you already have an intergovernmental agreement as to the purchase of the property, but it doesn't really address that after closing. That's where our concerns are at this point. And so this is a requirement. So we have the ability to terminate in the event that we have not reached this agreement by June 10th. And just as a aside, I will tell you when I talked to the guys at Union Pacific, I think if push came to shove and we had until the end of the year from the STB and that mid-June time was coming up and we weren't done with this, I do think they'd push it again. What Rick Harris said was, well, we'd sure like to get it done this year. Okay. So I do think there's some flex in that date, depending on what the STB does. Continuing on, section 6, the closing at the moment on or before June 30th of 2022. They got the year right this time. Good. Continuing on, section 10, which is on page 7. This is the covenant on the land, which I think we discussed very briefly before. It was the original proposal from UP prohibited us from using the land for park purposes, which didn't seem to be conducive to the trails use. So they have fixed that. So we cannot use the land for anything other than really park, trail, recreational use. And that's fine, because if we did that, we would probably void our trail use anyway. So this is consistent with the grant of authority from the STB and so on. The last item that I want to just mention again, the indemnity is still in here, of course. It's so pages 8 to 9. They're selling us this property as is, where is, and we are taking over the property. We are indemnifying them. We did try in a few of the revisions of this to push something on UP, just to say, okay, well, because we asked them, do you know of anything? And they sent us what they had in their file, which was basically nothing. And we said, okay, we're going to put in here that we've asked for everything and you've given us what you have and it's nothing. No. We're not putting that in. We can't put that in. So, I mean, everything we tried to get them to limit this or at least put some training wheels on it at all, they rejected completely. So this is the hill to die on for UP.
And,
so that is.
And Charles said the same thing.
Yeah, he said he was not that surprised.
He's never seen any railroad give him that.
No, so he said he'd managed to negotiate a couple of times a little bit of a hedge on that, but even that, he said, not necessarily UP, other railroads, and that this is really, for them, this is a big motivator. Once they wash their hands of it, it's gone, and they really don't want to hear from anybody ever again. And as we all know from trying to get a hold of them for environmental issues or runoff or whatever, now they're very good at ignoring people. So the last thing they want is to turn it over and then get harassed by a contract party who would have an easier route to recovery from them than a civilian. So that's, other than, as we've already discussed, that's sort of the highlights of the purchase and sale agreement. I am comfortable recommending that if you all don't have any other questions, other than obviously we've got to change that date for the feasibility review period, I'm comfortable recommending that you approve the signing of this agreement. Obviously, there's a lot of due diligence that would need to happen before you proceed to closing, but it sounds from all the feedback we're getting from UP, IDNR, our expert counsel, and so on, that if there is a signed purchase and sale agreement before the STB, it does substantially increase the chances that we get the extension that we're seeking. And I think that is a good reason, frankly, to go ahead and get it signed off on sooner rather than later.
And like I said, he's done an excellent job of giving us several places where if things fall through, we are not obligated to do the actual purchase.
And frankly, if you just change your minds and don't want to do this after you think about, it's going to be based on information, but based on Farnsworth's work, or if we find out that the licenses are doing something that restricts our use so much that we can't live with it, if the pins are all messed up or something else happens, or we can't get Peoria County to come to bat, anything like that, you can pull the plug. There's no obligation to close. And that's really critical. So,
Fred, what's our share of the purchase price?
It's the same as on the intergovernmental agreement today.
Those numbers don't add up to 100.
They add up to like 100.01. Yeah, and this is from your existing intergovernmental agreement. So I didn't want to start monkeying with the numbers. So this is directly out of the existing. So right now, Hannah City is 27.27
Which is what's the? What I did is I just looked at what our total amount
Okay.
we've got set aside.
It would be, for Hannah City, it's $107,332.
107, what?
332.19.
So,
Taking the grant off and everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's minus the grant. We're at 107,332.19. Now that doesn't include the 16,000 or the.
right, that's why I was trying to give you guys some context. I've looked at what we've got set aside in the
Rail account.
Yeah, and we've got 149,755, so that's about 42,423 of additional money available to. So if it's not covered by the grant and the partners all run and hide, we've got roughly 42 grand to play with. If I'm crunching my numbers right.
That's where the 16 would come out as well.
It would need to, unless, like I said, if we can become part of the grant, great.
Yeah.
Now our percentage would go up. No, it wouldn't.
Our
No
percentage.
percentage wouldn't.
Our percentage wouldn't, but our amount we would pay would, because this is based on the sale price of
Of 80%,
197, one.
Yeah, so our
199.67.
portion of that, I guess, 1/3, it would be our 1/3 of that, I guess, roughly,
43.65 or something.
or our 27.7
Yeah.
would come out of that 42. Yeah, and or if we're fully on the burden for all legal, all environmental.
And we've got $40,000 in addition to what we are committed to pay for. The current purchase price is $1,967,300. I've got 232. They've got 332 or something in their agreement, but it's somewhere around there.
We have 1,965.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got different numbers than what's in the purchase agreement.
Yeah. It's okay. The purchase agreement is lower.
That's right. As long as the purchase
As long
price
as it's
is
lower.
Is part of the reason you want to lay out the pins? Have they provided any can they provide a guarantee that this is a continuous uninterrupted route? There's no chance of there being a gap anywhere in it that's been hiding all these years that somebody may maybe accidentally find it sometime?
Well,
Because some of this railroad is mid 1800s.
right.
So,
The premise of Rails to Trails is that
Okay.
it is contiguous.
okay.
That being said, I mean,
Somebody
it's-
pops up and says, hey, look at this. There's 20 feet in here that the railroad missed 120 years ago. Is there even or somebody, if they actually try to litigate that, would somebody say, you know what? 120 years ago is when that should have been, it's been used like that.
Right.
You're
Well,
not going to stop it now and put a gap in it.
there's an adverse possession argument
Yeah.
yearly, for any of this. So adverse possession, you all know, if somebody uses your property for 20 years, open, notorious, obvious, they own it. So, I mean, that rail line's been in there.
And with that being said, I believe there is a portion of that. Does that go through a farm field?
There's several portions that go through farm fields,
Oh,
I think.
yeah.
in there.
That the rail is no longer there.
Right.
Right.
The rails have been taken out completely.
rails are-
Yeah,
Right.
rails
I
are
know they've
gone.
been out, but I thought there was some portion up towards.
Can you adverse possess a railroad, though? Because you can't a government entity.
Well, see, and that is where the Rails to Trails STB jurisdiction comes in.
Okay.
So because it's under Rails to Trails, the feds have jurisdiction over the whole line, and adverse possession doesn't apply.
Correct.
If the abandonment goes through, let's say March 30th rolls around, we don't get an extension, we don't close, the
UP then
UP will
abandons
probably remove its abandonment petition. It will continue to own the property. But when it goes to sell pieces of the property, those pieces won't be subject to the federal jurisdiction anymore. So whoever buys it is going to have to go into the records and figure out if that farm field's been there for 20 years. If there were reversionary property interests that somehow got unextinguished because the abandonment was abandoned, that sort of thing. So that's the difference. That's why STB is important here.
that's
Is because
why
we don't
it's
have to
real-
analyze things like.
But you can't adverse possess a railroad anyway, can you? I mean, otherwise they would be losing ground all over the place.
As long as it stays a railroad. That's
Yeah.
why we are
It's a
railroad.
railroad.
Yeah.
That's why the UP and rail bank did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So that's what the rail banking is for.
yeah.
It's
If
'Cause
we don't
otherwise,
buy
no.
it, and the railroad takes it out of rail banking, then they can sell off different pieces.
Yeah.
And
whoever buys it is going
whoever
to have
buys
to.
it has to do the due diligence of,
But you did,
State law would apply.
you were under the impression that they were not going to take it out of the rail banking, or they were.
No, they're going to keep it, is what they've said. They're not going to abandon it, and they're not going to do rail banking anymore. They're just going to keep it. They're just going to own it as they have been owning it, and sell it for parts, I suppose. Now they said they still prefer to do the deal with us because we're here. We've got money.
It's one
It's easy.
transaction. Yeah.
It's easy peasy.
They're not gonna find anybody to do the whole thing.
No, they are not. And
But they
Good
won't
luck
deal with
selling.
individual people. I mean, they're still gonna want to do chunks, but they're not gonna find anybody to do the whole thing, probably.
that's right. That's
Unless
right.
somebody really wants to speculate on reselling it afterwards.
But you can't. Really. I mean, it's very hard to resell.
Well, I mean, if they abandoned it though.
Yes,
They had something about it.
they
Then you spend the
state
money
law.
splitting it up and approaching everybody and trying to see, hoping you can get your money back.
So they'd rather sell it to us,
Yeah.
but they're also kind of ecumenical about it. They'll go on as they are if they need to.
I mean, they haven't done anything in 30 years. So,
Is that the last car that was?
Yeah.
early 80s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that is where we stand on the purchase and sale agreement. Again, I think I can speak in favor of signing it, subject to changing that one day, and with the understanding that we can bail if needed, and if we don't get the extension, it's frankly going to just do it on its own. On that point, let's come back to what Brian had brought up earlier. If there is a will in the village to close on this project by March 30th without the partners being on board, then I agree that we should we should set Farnsworth loose as soon as possible, like tomorrow. From our last meeting 2 weeks ago, I did not have at all the impression that that was the way that the village was leading, but it's worth a discussion.
I don't think I'm comfortable moving forward without the others.
Okay. And
The
and
feeling is that they're probably going to come on, at least one of them.
I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
I really don't know. We've had others back out. Fulton County backed out. Bellevue backed out.
I don't know if Bellevue
They were on the
even got on the back off.
They were on the original one.
I think we should forgive me, go ahead.
It all comes down to money for them. Peoria County, the money that they're using to buy this, they've taken out of a economic development fund that they loan money for economic development issues. They're considering this an economic development thing. To be able to do an ongoing yearly amount in their budget every year, that's where they're hesitant.
Yeah.
It's hard to sell to the voters that, hey, we're spending $10,000 a year on a trail.
Yeah, we have to assume no.
I think that's right. I think that's I think we have to assume we're on our own. We may not be, but.
And like I said, there's going to be money that's going to have to be spent. We knew this 20 years ago when we started this project, and that's why we started saving. That's what we've got. Well, probably saved about $200,000 for this project already. We spent some money out of it for different things already, but that's why we did it. Because there were a lot of people in our community that really were looking forward to this happening. We'll have to spend money. You know, Farmington, they've got several parks. So, you know, they're saying, well, do we take money out of this park, you know, and put it for the rails? That's what they're wrestling with.
Everybody's on board for the purchase. It's just the continuing.
Right.
Because honestly, the thing's going to sit there for a long time with no activity until a huge chunk of money comes along to even develop part of it.
Sure.
The one caveat I would say, Caleb, is they're on board for the purchase price to be paid with the 20% of the grant. They're
Yeah,
not necessarily on board for the legal and the environmental. Maybe that doesn't make a difference. I just want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think all of that wraps up into the purchase price. I really think that the grant will be used for all of those expenses.
And we need to look at also if it should fall through and it's something that the board doesn't want to, we have the money, we've been saving the money for having the Farnsworth environmental done, paying for the lawyer, that stuff, we would already have the money, so it's not like we'd have to take it out of the general fund, so.
exactly. Take it out of the fund that's been saved for, and then
Right.
that's what that ended up paying for. Yeah.
So it's not an extra cost we're gonna have to incur.
For me, the question is about time, right? Do you want to close do you want to move forward, assuming independence and full cost on us, and the grant? Again, my position would be is make the assumption the grant's not going to cover any of the other costs because that's worst case, and to be able to close by the original date, which is the end of March, or wait and see what happens with the extension and know that we may be putting money out that we'll never get any benefit from, but we've got it saved. So it's, to Tony's point, it's not new money.
Yeah.
It exists.
What happens if this goes through and then it's just a total dead end as far as getting anything ever developed? Can this infinitely sit there as a trail that never gets built?
You know,
It could be a rough trail.
I don't see that. Like I said, there are people who are really interested in this and wanting to see this go through. They're already planning on hooking this trail to Wildlife Prairie Park and also to the Rock Island Trail. There are plans on the way. Peoria County is pushing this. So it's not like they're against trails.
No, and frankly, Peoria County has been going around talking about all its great trail programs that it's going to be doing. It's gone to Bellevue and told them about how great the trail is going to be. I mean, it's
So they are very supportive of
they're
trails.
gung ho conceptually. It's just when it comes time to actually
Yeah,
put
I mean,
this
that's
bill
what I mean,
for it,
yeah.
where it's a little harder to pin them down. I would say, just to directly address the question of if we can just let it sit. My understanding is from the grant that there are some de minimis things we have to do. The signage that Fred talked about, those are required, and I think just from a insurance standpoint, there is no way that you can just let it sit without putting up barriers or something.
Yeah.
Especially if there are dangerous areas where the trestles are and so on.
Yeah, automatically barriers on the bridges. And,
Of course, yeah. And I would say that the odds of just being able to completely ignore it are low. There will be some. You're going to hear from Travola. You're going to hear from people
down in Bellevue where the ATVs
in
are
Bellevue
riding and stuff.
occasionally. So I don't know that you can completely just buy it and that's completely it.
But till some big amount of funding came in to develop part of it, it would just sit because the maintenance, of course, would cost, but
Yeah.
the village would never, even with the partner. I mean, maybe with the partners, they could eventually develop part of it. But if we went alone, it's never going to get developed unless the outside funding source comes in.
And I think that was always the understanding,
Yeah.
isn't it, Fred? From the get go, there was an
And that's
understanding.
why we have worked to set up this 501c3.
Yeah.
We have not solicited funds. There are funds that have been donated to this already that are just kind of sitting there right now. If we purchase this, then we will make a huge push to ask for donations, corporate donations, things of that nature from
Look for
people.
more grants.
more grants.
Yeah.
There are
And there-
state grants and
there's-
other federal grants that we can use to develop it.
Probably private grants too. I mean,
Private grants also.
if people like Bezos' ex-wife out there giving away.
John, can you speak to, maybe you can't, I don't know, but let's say something falls apart and this doesn't go through and it reverts back to the way you described, and we come back and we say, we would just like to buy Taylor Road to Eden Road, 5 miles. The chances of that are,
I don't know. I really don't know.
It just depends on if they decide
I mean,
to keep it
granted,
rail
our
gun.
total cost just went from, whatever, 100,000 to 400,000.
Right.
Because we're buying 5 miles of the 25, so.
The
So that
grant
cost
obviously,
just goes way up.
the grant doesn't apply
The
anymore.
grant goes away.
Yeah.
And so that's the big problem.
Right.
Do I think that they'd sell it? I just don't know.
Yeah.
I cannot.
So our
You
cost
never
would
know.
go
I
up.
mean, it's a big enough chunk. I've seen chunks that big sell. I mean,
Yeah.
but in this case, you have to be big enough for them. If you went there and said you wanted to buy what touches your backyard, you're never going to get a response back ever.
No.
But I've seen.
And why bother? Frankly, just
Yeah.
use it. See what happens.
I've done a power line
That's what's
project
happening
near
now.
one in eastern Illinois. And what it was 12 miles, 14 miles, and it followed. The power line followed a railroad that wasn't there.
Hmm.
The railroad was all bought out by the local farmers. But
Yeah.
one of the guys that I parked equipment in his barn during a snowstorm, he said, yeah, the reason we got this bought was my mom. We formed a corporation for like 50 different farmers that along here.
Oh,
His mom was the head of the corporation.
well, the whole-
She negotiated exactly. They bought the whole thing out, and then
Mhm.
inside themselves and said, "Okay, Bob's getting this," Larry, and broke it up amongst all the farmers that were part of it because the railroad wouldn't negotiate with individual landowners. But if you said, "Okay, we're interested in this big a chunk," here's one person to negotiate with, they would do it.
Yeah,
Then they just had to split it up on their own afterwards, and so
that makes sense.
yeah. But you have to have a big enough piece to get them to even pay attention to you.
And that's something too I didn't even think about. Let's say, I'm glad you brought that up, Caleb. Let's say, we're able to get this going and we get the whole 24.7 miles. Let's say, we start at Farmington, or we start Hannah City and start working so far, and we know we're not going to be able to develop this certain area because costs are going to be astronomical. Big trestle is going to have to be taken out. It's going to have
Yeah.
embankments and abutments put in. If we have something like that, are we able to then not use that, or are we able to sell from there down?
Can't
Can't sell it.
We're not
Yeah.
able to sell it, but we are able to cut it off
Just
and
not
say,
use that piece. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So to that point, nobody comes along with us. We're on our own, on the back end of things. And even though that they purchased it, we could say, well, we're going to develop Taylor Road to
Yeah.
Eden, right?
Yep.
And be done with it because that's all
They're
we
not
got.
going to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
But you infinitely we have this 25 miles. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you say west of Farmington, we know we're never going to develop. It dead ends out there.
Right.
So it's going to go from the tie-in at Kickapoo over to Farmington. I mean, if you say, we will literally never spend a dime on this portion there. It just stays permanently part of it, just undeveloped, and there's
Right.
nothing where it ever gets trimmed off. And
But still have the liability.
We still have liability.
Yeah, you still have the liability of
Basic
it.
maintenance for that.
yeah,
And that's the spooky part.
yeah, because that's the worst part of it. It dead ends.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the bigger structures are at.
Well, yeah. It'd just be a very odd circumstance to have the village of Hannah City owning something 20 miles away.
Yeah,
That you have no practical control over, or even you don't even have eyes on it.
we would have to then maybe get into agreements with, law enforcement in that area.
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to. It's private. If you call
Right.
the cops, they're going to show up onto your personal property and kick trespassers off.
But
You
who
know.
are you even going to know?
Oh,
that's,
yeah,
the,
exactly.
that's the spooky part.
Yeah.
Is that it's so far away. You just
Yeah.
don't have eyes on it. You're not aware.
a lot of that is so overgrown now.
Oh, it's terrible. I've walked it.
Yeah. You could barely walk through it.
Fun.
Yeah.
I did.
I had the dream that I could take a four-wheeler down on a one job. During the summer when it's grown up, you can't even get down it. It's so meshed over the side of it.
Down in
That is the
Farmington,
advantage of winter.
West of
There's
Farmington.
nothing there.
Yeah. I've done a few things along there, and it's rough. It's
So-
rough through there.
So I guess
To me, the questions I'm sorry. The questions before the House are: Do we approve the UP agreement? And it sounds like we've got enough outs that our legal counsel saying yes, go forward. And then, after that's approved, or assuming it's approved, what's the timing on the due diligence? Do we want to, because I guess, and you guys can speak to me, that if we approve the agreement, we're approving the associated costs with the due diligence, I would assume.
You can
Or at least
stagger those decisions, but that is at some risk of not getting things done.
Correct. So to me, with everything else can wait. It's the environmental is the only thing we have to decide.
Sure. Yeah.
Because if we close that in March, it's going to be us going on our own and seeing who joins it afterwards. And if nobody does, then then there probably isn't a commission form for the trail like it talks about. It's probably just a village board then that
Oh yeah.
oversees the trail.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
what it would be.
Yeah.
You're the owner.
Yeah.
So the board is either saying we're comfortable going it alone, or we're comfortable spending the money and not going it alone, but taking the risk that we're going to spend the money. I guess that's the.
I find it, I mean, Peoria County would still be spending money. You're saying they're on board with all this trail stuff and they're going to pursue ways to get it linked up without actually even being a party to the trail then, or?
I know.
I mean,
It's tough political.
Yeah.
So what they have to do is they have to convince the board that, hey, we're committed to trails. We want these trails. You know, we're already looking at hooking up Wildlife Prairie Park
Yeah.
and
Rock
Rock
Island.
Island Trail. It doesn't make sense not to support the Hannah City Trail.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Are they
just-
nervous that it's an open-ended agreement? It just says portion of maintenance, and there's, I mean, obviously, if nothing's developed, your yearly maintenance is going to be rehanging some signs and fixing a few gates. Then, obviously, if you have 20 miles maintained, then it's going to be bigger maintenance.
And we can tighten that agreement up somewhat as far as putting an exact number to it, so that
Well, and they'd be on the commission anyway. They would be
They'd be making the decision.
exactly. They could limit what
Yeah.
they spend by saying we're not going to do this because we're going to be on the hook for maintenance. So,
My guess
You
is they're going to feel differently than we do. In other words, if they put in 20% to buy the property, they're going. My thinking is their expectation is that it's going to be developed and used and all that kind of stuff because they purchased the property. But in my view, if Hannah City owns it and we're the only ones taking care of it,
yeah, they just donated it to us basically.
Yep.
Is essentially what it amounts to. If they choose not to be part of it,
right.
then you just donated the money to us. We'll decide what goes on with it.
Absolutely.
And if you want to hook onto it, then someplace, and you're going to
They
have to be a
gotta
fee to hook onto it to maintain that portion where it hooks on. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't make much sense for them to put in for the acquisition if they're not going to be parties going forward.
Yep.
But stranger things have happened, so
Yeah.
so yes, I think as Brian said, the first issue is whether you all are comfortable executing on the purchase and sale agreement today, or authorizing Tony to sign it today. And then the second issue is whether you want to start Farnsworth moving tomorrow, or if you prefer to wait.
we actually have to bring that back for a vote because we don't have it on the agenda for a vote tonight.
Well, that's why I asked. That's why I brought it up. That if you're approving the signature of the agreement and moving forward, to me, that's committing us to the due diligence.
yeah, that's got the due diligence in there.
That's true.
I mean, Michael, you may feel differently, but
Are we talking the statement of willingness?
no, I'm talking about if we
It's
sign the UP agreement, we're saying we're going to do the due diligence. Doesn't have a price in there, but we're committing to do.
Authorize Farnsworth to start, even though that item's not specifically on there.
Right.
Signing the purchase agreement is, which includes in the due diligence.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
that
point.
is part of the due diligence.
To me, though, the only
That's
question,
weird.
to me, the only question is timing. Do we tell them go now, or do we tell them to wait?
Hang on
until
a
we
couple
have the-
weeks.
It's going to be 50 degrees tomorrow, Brandon. Go
And
for
then
it.
15 the next day. Yeah.
Raining, drainage will be obvious.
Yes.
And to me, the answer to that question lies in: are you comfortable going it alone and owning the whole thing and being responsible for the whole thing and liability for the whole thing? And I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm trying to paint the worst case scenario so you guys can make a decision. And or are you willing to, for the lack of a better word, throw the $16,000 away in the event that we don't get the extension, and you're not willing to go alone, but we're going to spend the $16,000 for something that's never going to happen. I think that's where I'm all for signing the agreement. That's if Janicki says sign it, then I say okay, then we'll sign it. To me, the harder question is, do you pull the trigger on the 16 grand?
Because even without if they come back in 20 days and say the extension, they're not going to give it. I mean, we could still technically close
If you've got
if we have them done.
at least the basics done.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've looked at the
Yeah.
pins and the licenses,
Yeah.
then yeah.
Your point is we could still close independently by the end of March.
Yeah, it'd be a crunch, but it's
We just wouldn't have the
feasible.
intergovernmental, obviously, because nobody's even going to meet by then, or we're not going to have any
Right.
answers.
Right. So
That's
you,
why the
you'd be
questions are:
going
go
in
it alone
alone.
and risk, or risk spending the money and for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Or do you delay and take
risk
the risk
everything
of not getting it done by March
Yeah.
30th? And there's no right answer to this. I'm sorry.
No, it's just opinions at this point.
Mhm.
Me, I mean, I don't.
So do we have an agreement on the purchase agreement?
We do
Yes.
for the
With
purchase
the other,
only.
with Farmington and with Peoria?
For the purchase only.
Yeah,
Okay. For the
they're
purchase
good on
only.
purchasing it. Yeah.
They have all pledged up to their 20%.
Of the old number.
So let's just tackle the question of are you comfortable going it alone? I think that's a key question for this board. Are you comfortable doing this whole thing?
Because if you're not, we might as well wait. Because
Exactly.
if the extension doesn't happen, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
And if you're
but
comfortable going alone, you might as well sign everything and kick Farnsworth off because
and we've
then
already
you can
got,
still close by March 30th.
and we already have that $16,000 out there, so that's what we've been saving it for. So
Yeah, that part really doesn't bother me at all. The kicking Farnsworth loose part, I don't really care about at this point. I'm fine with doing that. That doesn't bother me because we've been saving up all this time, so I'm not going to let that trip us at this point when we have that money saved. Just the going alone, like that's the big question. I don't think anybody else is really concerned about the 16 since it's been saved, and that'd be kind of silly to throw it away over that.
How are you feeling on the going alone?
That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, and frankly, if you're willing to spend the 16 with Farnsworth, regardless of whether you close or not, you don't really have to make a decision about going alone today.
True.
So
That's a good point.
it's just that you're prepared to sacrifice the 16, and
Yeah.
you can continue to ponder the.
Because we've got.
I don't want to throw the whole
Yeah.
opportunity away over that,
Exactly.
over
That's-
possibly eating the
That's what I'm
16
thinking too.
when we've had the money set. So worst case scenario, this all falls through. We take the 150 we have saved up. We pay Farnsworth. We pay you guys, and we walk away. And we're
Yeah.
Yeah.
whatever was saved for that all those years. That
You got another $100,000 you put in the general fund.
yeah, exactly.
You can still
you
move
know,
forward and
Yeah,
still
build the
wait.
park.
it was saved slowly over that time. And you know what I mean? At least you give the fighting chance, the money to work. So.
And technically, going back
Yeah.
to the vote or not vote on Farnsworth, well, all we're approving is the due diligence. We can come back later with the invoice and say the due diligence costs $16,000 and vote to approve that.
They could still
Yeah,
start because
that's what I'm
the
thinking
purchase
too.
agreement's
I
been
just
done.
wanna get
We
those
can't
thoughts on
close.
that.
yeah, because it is a time and materials type thing. So
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I do think you can kick the can on the long-term plan.
Yeah.
If you're willing to sacrifice the 16. And now that I understand a little more really about the history of
Yeah.
the fund that you all have.
We've been putting acorns for a long time. So yeah,
I'm fine with that.
it's not coming out of any imminent budget. So
Okay.
I'd say, yeah, let's move forward. We can get him going, and if things develop as it goes on, fine. Otherwise, we've got ways out if we need to.
do I hear a motion?
yeah,
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
yes, I'll give it to whoever.
Is this 3E, motion to approve
Yeah.
signing of the purchase agreement?
Yes.
Yeah. Where I put that up.
I have a motion by Pearson, second by Johnson. Everybody understands what this is for, right? Hopefully.
Signing the purchase agreement, but not committed to actually.
Closing.
How you
Closing.
feeling, Zach?
And we are committing to, in this,
Yeah.
we're committing to do the due diligence, but as those
Yeah.
due diligence costs come back, we'll present them here and approve those as part of the package, okay?
But Brandon will be out there tomorrow. He promised us he would be out there
Well,
tomorrow.
hey, we'll meet you Thursday about noon.
Yeah.
I will not meet you, but I just want to see pictures of you.
So let's roll call this. Sidak?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Do I need to vote on this one?
I don't think you need to. But
You want to?
You want to be safe.
Yes.
All right.
Motion carries 4 yeas.
Very good. And I will tell you too that since you are cutting friends with Lewis, Charles and UP and everyone seems to think that is another good fact to put in front of the STB on the extension.
Yeah.
That's
So-
one reason I like to.
We will put that in. I will make those changes to the motion. before
They
we file
actually
it.
said the words, if Brandon Lott's involved,
Yeah.
we
He's out
know
there.
it's a good thing.
If we can get a snapshot of him, on the ATV, even better.
And maybe if you threw Charlie Tucker's name on there for.
Done their due diligence.
I am just,
I do have a couple of questions and clarifications whenever we
sorry.
Yeah, go.
Signature page.
You know, we already
Tony,
voted.
sign it.
Yeah, no, I want to make sure I understand, and we said with expectations. We had said we would do the work in 3 and another 2 we would report it. That's a bad date. I'm thinking the second meeting in March is the 15th, which is about 3.5 weeks. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to write anything up. But do we need to come and tell you what we found?
Yes.
Not 2 days before the 30th? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to think of logistics here.
You're talking the 15th, meeting on the 15th.
Yeah, that would be 4 weeks. So we would, anticipate having the work done. We may not have a big fancy report, but we can come here and present to you, hey, this is what we found. Because frankly, that's going to be the hard part.
What's the?
Has to be a fancy report.
No, literally, I just want you to walk in and go put your.
And that's the expectation.
Go like this.
Yeah.
Or this.
Because, what
Notes.
happens if you find that there's something that's mildly risky, and we've talked about this, it's not going to be binary.
Yeah, your notes, your wherever it's at. Yeah, your rough. Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
going to be, there's 130 years of history out here, and there are some potential. Is it worth the risk?
I mean,
And those are the
obviously,
tough decisions you're
you've
going to make.
got lots we do,
Okay.
but I know that there is like an option if we needed to do a special
Yes.
thing, right?
absolutely.
You can have a
I'll send
special
you
meeting.
Who's running behind?
But
Not even behind.
yeah,
Well, the second half of that question is, are we potentially needing to present this to the county and Farmington as well, or we can just invite them here? Doesn't change what
Well,
I'm
they've committed to-
No, we had to invite them to call in.
yeah.
And the other thing, I guess, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but the main thing is if there is something that you find that you think is going to stop it,
Deal killers.
there's no sense in doing the other 20 miles.
You're right.
Yeah.
You find it in the first 5 miles and you're saying,
Get their diesel fuel pouring out from underneath the
You know,
track somewhere.
that would be a
Some
deal
bubbling
killer.
crude.
Yes.
The thing is, and
He's not going to tell anybody.
I think Charles, our expert, has also said it, and DNR has also said too.
Because of those dates.
Whenever they do things like this, they assume that it is a contaminated site, so that anytime you're going to be removing dirt from there, you can treat it as contaminated. We're really not removing because we're just making a trail. If anything, we're adding stuff to it instead of removing stuff. So,
Yeah, I would never suggest doing any deep diggings.
No.
right.
Looking
And,
for
and
problems.
that was part of the discussion with Farnsworth up front was, understanding the context of this. This is what we're calling a modified phase 1.
Yeah.
It's based on an
Yeah,
assumption.
we're not
we can
selling
only
a
use it
portion
for
to put a
trail
school
use.
on it.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
and the covenant that's on that property helps to support the limited scope of the environmental review. So
So I think that,
it all syncs up.
I'll tell my team tomorrow, let's anticipate presenting findings, the Ides of March, and a report to follow. Because I don't want to, it gives you 2 weeks if you were to find something to figure out something.
I mean, you know where all the historical stops were at, where they could have been transferring stuff.
I'll be here for the meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe a little loopy. All right, so I think Fred, Johnny, you're more than welcome to stay if you would like, but you're not obligated to.
It's time for dinner.
Well, Gills is right down here.
I'm sorry. I've done this for 24 years. I think I'll take my leave.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much.
You guys for all your work.
Oh, no, It's a very interesting project. I mean, I sure hope it gets built. I would love to use the trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally tomorrow.
Yeah, you will. Yeah.
You take this coffee
That
cup.
stuff's still there.
That's your coffee cup. Are you just leaving it here?
I'm just leaving it.
You got another one over there too.
I noticed you had a personalized. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank
Again,
you, thank
if
you. Appreciate
anything
it.
comes up, any questions, just write us and get hold of me.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys know if I hear anything from the other.
And real quick, Caleb, you may be able to answer this. How accurate are their PIN numbers in
Not very.
Peoria County? They're not.
Well, I know Fulton
Yeah,
and Peoria are not drawn. There's way more nuance to the boundary of that railroad than these straight corridors they're showing all over the place.
Oh,
There's a
yeah,
lot of
there's-
spots where the boundaries are more jaggedy, and I know Fulton County in spots doesn't have the correct right of way width in there.
Right.
For sure.
And I know a lot of ours aren't straight, and I see that. in
Yeah.
areas, especially back here by.
Like if you go to Eden, where they built the new grain elevator, that's on the side of an old grain elevator.
Kramer.
That right of way actually gets within like 6 inches of one of the rails for a 12-foot portion, and it coincides with the double doors of the building that was standing there because that's where they used to drive cattle onto the boxcars. So they had to get the right of way close enough that he could step over that gap from private property to railroad. And it does it all the way along there where they had loading spouts and things like that. So I mean, and there's other areas like that too. So
We want to make sure that there's at least a through line. That's the key.
yeah,
So we don't have a section that's, may I?
Yeah.
We don't have a section that's here and then here, so that, you have to be like one atom thick to get to continue through. So we
Yeah.
can make sure that we have a contiguous
yeah,
column.
And that's one problem there where they built the limestone fire department.
that's a lease. I think that's a yearly lease, isn't it? Yeah,
We'll get.
There is a lease on that,
yeah,
but the trail runs right through their driveway.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's shown on the because they
Because
Nancy
Leroy,
did that project. I think they had showed it on the plat for the fire department.
yeah, because Leroy donated all that property out there.
But we can jack up the lease price.
No.
Yeah, put a fence across the fire department.
What they might do though is they may give us the same amount of property around behind their place that we would just route the trail right around them.
Oh, if it ever came to, yeah,
Actually develop
eventually,
it.
if it ever came to getting developed, yeah,
Get developed.
get an alternate route besides taking it across the driveway.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We run right behind their
Yeah.
place, and I could see them working with us on something like that.
Yeah. Especially since I know the owners.
Of the fire department, the citizens of Limestone Bay.
Yeah, I mean, this is the nicest way possible, but no way.
No, Philippi Hagenbach over there. Because they actually gave all that or donated some of that property.
Yeah,
The area back there. Even back where the camper place is, they own all that property.
yeah.
So, finally, on to minutes. Number 4, finally minutes. Before you, everybody should have a copy of the February 1st, 2022 village minutes.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as presented. Second.
Motion by Johnson, second by Pearson. Any further discussion? Roll call. Pearson?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Zidek?
Yes.
Motion carries. That finally brings us up to the treasurer's report.
Nothing really to report.
Nothing crazy in here. that
Nothing
stand out.
crazy. There is a second Illinois American Water bill in here that was paid at the last meeting. I don't know why we got two in such quick succession. My only assumption is that because it's a short month, they did it more quickly than normal. But there is a second Illinois American Water bill on the if that's of anybody's looking. So. Otherwise, normal bills.
And I have to say, this breakout again is so much better.
Cleaner.
so much cleaner. It lets you see what it is, line items, everything. So if somebody has a question why we're spending it out of that fund, they can look at their fund and go.
Glad you like it.
Make a motion, we approve treasurer's report, pay all outstanding bills.
Second. Motion by Johnson, second by Sidak. Any further discussion? Roll call. Johnson,
Yes.
Sidak,
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Brings us down to Mr. Lott.
I think the only comment I want to make, I know we're having some fun. We will do the data collection first, the database search to look to see where the state has the hot spots, maybe get some information from some people who are familiar with it. These licenses, I don't know how long I want to wait on some of that stuff to see if we get locations. But we want to get smart before we go out in the field. So it won't be tomorrow.
And I sent you the tribal and stuff, right?
You did. You did. So we'd like to get a little bit smart, plan a good day or days to do this. So we can absolutely get started doing some of the desktop stuff first to maybe have a little bit more success. I only have to go out there once and to know what to look for. If we know there's an issue in the past or a hot spot here or a crossing. So I know that's implied. I just wanted to make that clear. The only other things that I have are associated with the MFT stuff that I believe are in Brian's report. So I'll stick around to participate in that discussion. I don't have anything else specific. It's not somewhere else. Unless somebody has a question.
I did also talk with one of our residents who does have a side-by-side. It does fit 4 people. So I told Brandon when he went out to do this, I may just go out and spend some time on the latter part down in the Hannah City area and down this end.
My dad has a side by side too. We need to use it.
That's great because that would be good to have.
And honestly, I don't. How much of this is even as I've been trying to educate myself. I was unfamiliar with some of it there in Peoria. How probably inaccessible some of that really is.
Some of it you're not riding down.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to be
Especially west of Farmington too.
Yeah.
That end where it kicks on the Kickapoo and then the far west end.
Right.
I'm not gonna.
And so we are in our scope to look at accessible portions or places that we know that we should expect troubles. We're gonna do our best to get on every piece of it, but it is we need to be smart about where we're at and safe too. So
Oh, you can get on every piece of it, no problem. Sometimes you just have to in out and backtrack. You're not gonna end at roads, but you can get on
There
every
be
piece
some
of it.
areas like down by Airport Road, things like that. We'll have to check those.
Because like some of the biggest structures are west of Farmington, but it's just in and out.
yeah. And again, to be clear, we're identifying that they exist. We're not giving you road ratings on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon. Michael?
Mr. Mayor, clearly there's a lot going on with Rails to Trail, so I don't have a whole lot to report on. There's a couple things coming up for Planning Commission. It looks like there's a plat approval for a new subdivision, very minor subdivision, and then a possible building addition for EMS. I think Brian and I need to talk about that a little more. And then only other thing was Brian reminded me today that there's a note on his calendar for getting started on the appropriations ordinance needs to be passed at some point in the middle of at some point during the first quarter of the fiscal year. I think that's April and May starting. So I'm sure we'll get the gears turning on that one soon. Sounds weird to say, but I did. The appropriations ordinance kind of snuck up on me since I felt like it was passed pretty recently.
That's why I put them on my calendar.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It really does. That's really all I had.
Okay. Brian?
So I guess give you a highlight sheet. It's pretty short. Cassandra and I are starting to work on the budget. We're trying to make it more realistic than we have in the past. I recognize that we don't want to go over because that creates new problems. So we're probably going to create a realistic budget, maybe then put 10% or somewhere around there to make sure that we don't go over.
Okay.
We're going to reduce some line items. We're going to look at consolidating some accounts and simplifying. And she and I are talking about that right now. And then out of that will become the appropriations ordinance. The water rates were implemented, so that's done. We are starting to have garbage contract meetings and getting bids for the garbage contract. It's not up until September, but we want to start looking at them now so we have an idea of what it might look like in the budget. And then I'm currently working with EMS on an expansion to their building and potentially the purchase of the other property. So that's all I've got going on. Plus the trail, plus MFT.
That's it.
That's it.
You normally talk longer.
Well, I've got a whole MFT thing coming, so I've kept it
You
short.
got anything from any of those? You don't have anything in hand yet?
I do not. I'm gonna call. I'm gonna see if I can get a contact with the new owners to have a conversation with them because I don't think they fully understand what's not happening on this end. We can.
For next time.
Yeah.
So we're going to change up a couple of the reports. So we'll start out with committee reports for finance.
I don't think we have anything to report.
Nope. We got the one CD coming due from Hannah City. And we've decided to take that CD since we're getting very little interest out of it. And we're going to end up 1st of March, we're going to go up and transfer that, cash that out and transfer that to the general fund.
Yeah, just to give you some context, right? What I want us to do is I'm challenging the team to begin building long range plans like we did for MFT, where we've got 4 or 5 year plans. We're working on buildings and grounds. We're working on storm sewer. I'm talking to Jim about water and sewer and the lagoon so that we know what kind of capital expenditures that we're looking at year over year over year. Then I think we can make better decisions on, do we want to take some of the savings that we've got set? Well, first of all, what amount of savings should we be putting back? And are we putting the right amount? And then once we start to build those reserves, how much do we want to lock into a CD or not, depending on what our plans are to spend it? So we're kind of operating under the assumption that as the CDs become due, we're going to move those monies into an account where we've got it held until we know how we're going to spend it, and then we make new decisions on CDs eventually. If that makes sense. Okay.
So like the CDs for water will move into the water account.
Correct.
Everything else. So we're going to jump down to F, police and planning, Mr. Johnson.
From 1:30 to 2. Not right. Yeah, 1:30 to 2:14. There was 30 incident reports. End of report.
Sanitary and sewer, Mr. Pearson.
Nothing to report.
Water?
Nothing to report.
Wow.
That's the way we like it.
And Rod's not here. I don't think he had anything for building grounds. I didn't see anything in his box.
He did not.
Streets and alleys, Brian, I'll let you talk to that.
Okay, so you've got 2 things. You've got 2 documents. One is a PowerPoint presentation that looks at the MFT program. The other is the map, and I'm sorry that the in black and white the scale doesn't, or the legend doesn't come through very well.
Here's the color one. You want to hold it up and point to it while you're talking?
Okay. So basically what I've done here on the presentation is, if you look at the slides, this is year 2 of our 5-year rotating plan that makes sure that every street gets touched every 5th year. So I got a review of what we did in 2021. So if you look at the revenue, year to date, we've got $33,000 in. We have a full year budget of MFT money. We have $40,000 on the revenue side, $13,500 on year to date Rebuild Illinois, and a full year budget of $27,000. So if you look at the totals, year to date, we've got 46.5. The full year budget would be $67,000, and then we've got $60,000 that we're putting away annually of our own money out of the general fund. Does that make sense? So every year in 2021 we had a full year budget of $127,000. Some coming from Rebuild Illinois, some coming from MFT, which makes up that 46.5K. And then $60K coming from that's going into savings that we're pulling out of our general. So the 127 of the income. If you look at the 2021 program summary, this is where we spent our money. So engineering 6,400, seal coating 64,000, sidewalks 9,900, crack fill 5,950, spray patch. I've rounded all this up, but 1243. So we spent 87.5K in total in 2021. okay? And we did, the coverage of that, we did Murphy, Jodan, Carroll, Brad Court, and we did the sidewalks on both sides of Main Street. That's what we did for the 87.5K. All right. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is the summary income and expense. So we had 47,000 plus 20K, so $67,000. Expenses of 87.5K. Total revenue of 127. So that means we moved 39.5K to savings. Our target was 40. So we spent the 87.5 of the 127. We moved the rest into a longer term savings plan for more MFT programs. Okay. Fiscal year 2020 program draft. All right. So we've got a total budget this year of 127. Again, budgeted income of 67,000 coming in from MFT and Rebuild Illinois. And then we've got that 60K, that 5,000 a month that we're putting aside of our own. So we've got a total budget of 127 for the fiscal year 2022 that begins in May 1. Okay. What we said is we wanted to do Pekin Lane, Clausen Court, First Street, Nora, Elbert, Runkle, and the remaining sidewalks, all the remaining sidewalks. The problem is if you add those costs up today versus adding them up when we built the program, that cost is right now right under $100,000 to do it. Our original budget, I believe, was closer to $75,000 to do it. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, we've got a proposal. So our proposal is to bid the full 100,000. Doesn't mean we'll spend it, but create the MFT program where we bid the same coverage that we planned for. Okay, even at the higher expenses, so the $100,000. Option one then would be to spend $67,000 of all the income, and then spend $33,000 of the earmarked general fund, so the 33 of the 60,000. That would net 27K to reserves versus the target of 52,000 that we were going to put in reserves. Okay. Option two is to eliminate Runkle, which is roughly $25,000. Spend closer to the original budget, the 75K, and we'd still be able to put the $52,000 into reserves. So our coverage gets smaller because prices went up, and we're putting less into reserves, or spend it all and do the same amount of coverage that we were going to do at the higher pricing and put less into reserve.
And Runkle would get moved to win.
Yeah, we don't know. So basically in the conversations that we had is we believe that since it's a 5-year program, that eventually things are going to get right-minded and costs are going to come down and we'd be able to do perhaps more. Maybe that's a foolish assumption, I don't know, but or at least the right amount that we had planned. And then the impact to the reserves really is what we were putting the reserves away for is eventually someday we might have a major project, or we're probably going to have a major project where we need to redo the whole street, right? Brandon, you can speak to that better than I can, but not just oil and chip, but go in and
Like Main Street.
Yeah.
Like we did Main Street several years ago.
And that's a couple $100,000.
Yeah, we didn't do as much as we would have liked to have, and that's what we spent, 100 something, was it?
So like 350, was it?
Yeah, it's a ton.
Yeah. It's the same thing though. You save forever to be able to do it. And
the thinking was Murphy was probably the number one place where we might need to do something. I don't know if everybody still agrees, but I believe that was the one that everybody said probably would need the first. And we thought that was a $300,000 or $400,000. Whenever we want to do a project like that, we may not have the full reserves to do it if we take chunks because we spent more because of the costs right now. So really all we're asking for from you at this point is general direction. Do you want us to we're going to bid the 100K regardless. And I'm looking for some just general feeling as to whether or not you think you want us to spend the full 100,000 when we actually go bid it out, or do we want to spend the lower amount? We can eventually. You look confused. Well, when we build the MFT program, we can build it around the full 100,000, or no?
I would prefer to put an MFT program together for what you want to do. I think that would be. I think going in to say it's $100,000 program and then you only spend 67. It's the contractors that I'm worried about. You're gonna tell me you're gonna spend $100,000 and then spend half of it.
The price might have been different if you,
and they feel like they're getting jerked
Yeah,
So I guess that's the question.
and you use them too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Street, you want to do the scope or the dollars?
Yeah.
That's the question.
And the map again. I apologize. The legend's not great, but
Which of these streets? I mean, like Runkle, is that lined or?
there's the blue is what we're proposing. We do.
But I mean, as opposed to just willy-nilly seal coating everything. I know we talked about looking for future plans. Like, okay, do we have a street where we have a sewer cross that's garbage? You know, we may have to dig it up. I mean, we talked about replacing sewers at some point, getting a more comprehensive plan as opposed to just rotating every.
Yeah, no, we're looking at just seal coating. This is just keeping up with the seal coating.
The savings was the reserves was being able to do one major project 4 to 5 years from now, and based upon the which we understand is not great. It's better than what we've had, but because we'd like to do more than that. But and when we did the road evaluations before, I believe Runkle was considered the worst. Not Runkle. Murphy was considered the worst.
Yeah.
The other thing you're trying to do too is some continuity. Keep instead of piecemeal in town. You know, this section.
Yeah.
Some towns do quadrants and go around, but with understanding what was worse off. You know, I guess the only other comment I would have is, 5 years ago, you guys were spending $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now you're looking at maybe 100. Now I realize your funds, there's all kinds of additional funds out there, but not only are you spending 100, you're putting something back. So you're certainly in a lot better position. But the question is what program would you like to do? Would you like to hold the streets, spend a little extra because of the costs, or say no, we want to continue to put the same amount back every year? Just do less, and instead of a 5-year program, maybe at these costs, it's a 6-year program.
Yeah, the hopes is that maybe the pricing is better later, and we might be able to do more, but I don't know if that's going to be true or not.
I think it'd be more likely we just decide to do a 6 or 7 year program instead of a 5 and squirrel more away for bigger projects.
That's the question in front of you.
That's what I'm leaning towards too.
I mean, just because some of these, like, Murphy, I know we did spot repairs, we did some patching, but obviously basic garbage.
I need surgery.
Some of it, yeah, exactly. It needs tilled or something needs to go down deep and fix some underlying issues that you're never going to fix with seal coating. I mean, guess theory if you get a foot of it on there, maybe, but
You brought up another good point. I mean, we're currently operating at surplus. We could be putting more money outside, I think, for sewer, for water, and other things. And it would be nice if we were coordinated to the point where we knew we were going to do this sewer project and this street.
Because some places don't have them. I mean, it's City Pure all the time. You see a brand new stream with a patch down the center of American Water replaced the main, Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it happened when they finished Knoxville, and we had those terrible winters. There was those huge water main breaks, 3 or 4 of them in a row right after they got to do Knoxville. They had huge areas they took out of the patch.
So my point is, we're working towards that. I don't know how quickly we're going to get there, but that might be part of an argument to skinny the scope.
Because obviously you're not going to want to seal coat north of Chicago on Main Street, because eventually you want to keep doing that, rebuilding that like we did on both sides of the highway.
Which one?
Well, like on Main Street. So you wouldn't want to seal coat north of what we did, because we know we're going to come through eventually and continue that project probably, repaving it.
Good. I don't know if that has been determined. Is there a long-term plan to do that?
I thought we were just going to keep going north on it.
But that's what Brian was saying we need to look at.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I thought I missed a step. But it's things like that you want to identify.
That's my point, is like Runkle, if we do take Runkle off, that's fine. We save the money. Is Runkle something that in 3 years we consider doing something more major to? Or is there a sewer that runs down the center of it that's not lined, that's garbage? Or I don't,
And that's what we picked Runkle because it just matched up the dollars, right? So if there's a different priority, we're happy to do a different priority.
Well, that's what I mean if we looked at any of that stuff, because I have no problem just taking Runkle off and putting more away in the kitty.
But it might be worth looking to see, is Runkle worse than First, or is First worse than Runkle?
Well, at the end of the day, we did do a look at all that. We kind of came to the conclusion that they're all in similar shape, with the exception of Murphy, which was considered, I think everybody said, if you're going to redo one, that's probably the place to start.
Yeah.
But yeah, if what you're saying is hold the dollars and spend that dollars on the worst streets, eliminating one, we could go back and look. It wouldn't necessarily have to be Runkle.
Sure.
I would ask Roger what he thinks.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have Roger and Joe look at that But like I said, I think if I remember right, we kind of said everything's kind of in the same.
I think that's the answer.
There's not enough, with the exception of Murphy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that question could be asked. And the answer I'm looking for today, I guess, is do we hold the number of streets because we'll develop the program, bring it to you next week or next meeting for a vote, or hold the dollars. We'll adjust the roads to match those dollars and bring it to you for a vote again. The first.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess my thing is I kind of lean in my head towards less minor maintenance and more big hitter. You know what I mean? Like actual real meaningful, I mean, some of these streets are just going to be seal coated infill, but eventually you can't just seal coat forever. I mean, you can, but then you get the,
We don't disagree with that. I think what, again, going back to the discussions, I think it was, let's get through the 5-year program. Let's get everything seal coated, right? And then there's nothing that says that we have to go back and seal coat again.
No.
We could start the major projects and then save up and not do any seal coating for, I don't know how long seal coating normally lasts.
Depends on the traffic and the weather and then these things. But, lightly traveled streets can go for years and years and years. And some of them here have. And then some of them get beat up pretty good.
I mean, some of these 5 years may be too quick to even come back. I mean, some
that's
of these dead
the
ends.
point is the logic, right, wrong, or different. The logic was get everything, a base covered, plan for the biggest problem, which is Murphy, and have the money to do it. And then from there, we can decide if we're going to go. We'll have more data. We'll know what the streets look like after they've been seal coated, and we'll have more data to determine, do we want to continue to seal coat or do we want to save that money for more big projects?
What do we have in that road fund now?
How much is in the road fund?
Yeah, the
MFT fund?
nope, the Acorn fund,
The
Squirrel Way
road
Street
improvement
fund. Yeah,
306,000.
306.
Yeah.
That was even a little bit more. All right.
I think when we got to the end of the 5-year program, we were getting close to $500,000.
Yeah.
Because we're putting some away.
Yeah.
Every year. Like we weren't spending the full 127. We were spending somewhere between 60 and 75, somewhere 70, 75,000, and then we were also putting some back into for the big major projects.
Yeah, so 500,000 with no big sewer aspect to it would be would go a ways if it's just surface. If it's just the roadway itself would go a ways.
And the final caveat here piece of this actually works on both sides. There's an argument, but the bigger the project, the better your potential pricing.
Yeah.
Now the difference between a $100,000 project and a $75,000 project, when we hope to get 2 contractors to begin with, may not be critical. But 300 and 500,000 for the big projects, that could warrant better unit pricing and more interest from
exactly, and maybe another bidder.
So if the direction is to hold the program this next year at 75, we'll write that up. And the intent here, to Brian's credit, was to get out there in front of this and get it approved by IDOT, so we're able to solicit bids and
we're not racing Thanksgiving to seal coat.
Right, it's April, May, and
we need to do that for everything. and that's where we've fallen behind in the past, is we've waited until too late and everybody's already booked. And everybody's busy.
But this is how everything ties together. If we can get the accounts consolidated and the budget together, and we can start looking at how much we're putting aside for savings, because I think those numbers are somewhat arbitrary. And then
as far as 5,000 was a round number. That's how it was picked.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
2,500 for the water tower, and so much 1,500 for the lagoon.
Yeah.
What I would much rather do, because we know now on the MFT program, we've got a 5-year plan, so we know the money we're spending, what it's going to go for. I'd like us to be able to do the same thing for water and sewer and the lagoon and everything else. And then to your point, we can start connecting those dots. Well, the number one sewer priority, and this goes back to what we talked about with the GIS mapping, our number one sewer priority is on Runkle. And so when we do that, we should plan on doing the street after it, not before it, right? But we're not there yet. And nothing against the past. We've been we're better off than most because you've been putting the money away. So that's a great thing, right? We've at least got some money that's been put away. The fact that we're sitting here with money for the trail is phenomenal. You know what I mean? People are scrapping for money. but we don't have the plans to support the money and to know that we're putting the right amount of money around each place. So we've got that work to do. But yeah. So I think I hear what you guys saying is go with take Runkle off and go with the 75.
33,000 of earmarked funds is a 10% hit to the, right? If there's 306,000, that's,
Yeah, you're taking
roughly a 10% hit to the earmarked funds. Where I know we have some that there's Murphy, there's got to be some other ones here you've looked at, you're like, I would rather just like till that thing or something and start it over and,
and then
you would rather work on that than
Yeah, but
FFT too.
if every road was a 5-year project, we'll never get that. That's what we say. Some of them have to be the end.
Some you're just going to have to seal coat, move on, but there's got to be something besides Murphy on here that's like, man, I really wish we could. Knowing what you know about working in small towns,
Sure.
So I hate to hit the earmarked funds for a 10% hit when we are that close to having. I mean, right now you could do a big project with 300,000, throw the MFT with it 1 year, and have a pretty decent one. But you're sitting at that much farther behind. You just wiped out half a year's worth of.
So we'll have the formal MFT program at the next meeting
For you to
at the roughly 75,000.
Right.
And at this point, we'll assume we're pulling Runkle off.
just like every year, you'll approve the program. We'll get all the signatures and seals and stamps and send it down to IDOT, and hopefully they'll be quick. Thank you very much.
This Rogers and Joe and those guys have put a lot of work into this, and they get a lot of credit. And we've got Roger now trying to work on this. It's going to be a storm sewer program. Joe's the guy. He works for
Joe's my road guy.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say nothing. His.
And then also doing something for buildings and grounds that might include a new building and other things as well. Thank you. Are we still in the state of emergency?
I thought we were. I thought another disaster proclamation. I feel like it would have made headlines if Pritzker didn't.
I'm sorry, I jumped
Again,
Yeah, forgive me.
Do we need to vote on that?
No, because we'll bring the formal MFT program to the next meeting for vote. We're just looking for direction today.
Okay. So, economic development, Mr. Sydak.
I'm still waiting on a more comprehensive report from Megan Wilson. So, get in contact with her again. But, hoping to get you guys some more information about. They got. I know we talked about the big refurbishing of the park thing. They've got it, but that's a bit much for a first, economic development project. But they do have something interesting. They have some what they describe as relatively new park equipment they like to get installed.
We got it from Peoria Heights.
I thought they said the guy from Chill Coffee.
Yeah, they did get it from Chile. Sorry.
But they were looking for maybe some assistance covering the cost of installing that. So I thought that might be a good first project. But I'll have to get more information about that.
Again, the theory here is we've got BDD money, and is there a way to spend some of that BDD money on something other than new businesses, whether it be something more civic, a park, or something that would show the community that the more you support the local businesses, the more funding is available to do those types of things.
So what better to give a bunch of kids a new park?
No new equipment in the park.
Used
equipment.
Used equipment.
We won't tell
their plan together. For the
They won't care.
Say pay for it.
So, are we still in?
Yeah, there's still a disaster proclamation in effect from the governor.
Okay, yeah. That's the one thing I didn't know if it had expired yet or not. But
They'll expire every 30 days, but they've been like clockwork.
Taking them out. And I don't know what resolution number this would be. I have to
look at the minutes.
It says to be 220202. Yep.
So when do we stop this? The end of. When do they?
I would expect it to come, but they haven't said.
Stop what?
I thought they were saying something about this being
Emergency.
State, I thought so too. I thought I heard that
I hadn't looked all the way through some new executive orders that I think just released yesterday, but there are some things coming through the pipeline and changing. But as far as declaring every county in the state a disaster area, that's been going on for well over a year and it's still going on.
Yeah, he just doesn't really mean much to any cities. His
No, it's
executive
just-
powers.
This is
It's
just
in case.
authorizing the mayor to implement as the emergencies, services, disaster, whatever that plan is, and make expenditures if it's an emergency and completely
We can't
necessary.
meet or something.
Like what?
In case we can't meet or something.
Correct.
I guess my threat levels are so close to zero, you're not going to be able to tell that. I mean, it's kind of silly at this point, but
I don't think the mayor's had to use any
no,
emergency powers yet.
it's just become a
We just made it a formality just in case something should happen.
yeah.
We gotta sue the governor or something. So, we have resolution 2022-0202, the resolution to extend temporary executive powers pursuant to 65 ILCS 5/11-1-6. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Sidak. Write these down. Second by Pearson. Any further discussion? We'll roll call it. Sidak,
Yes.
Pearson,
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Motion carries 2-1.
I figured it would.
So you could also vote since there's been
Oh,
two
no
yes
vote.
votes.
Okay. Yes. 3-1.
I mean, next time we'll see.
I can start a trend.
Contrarian.
Always.
I don't see the need for them anymore. I don't think there's going to be anything. Yeah, in this case, we should just. Can we put them on indefinitely? So if a tornado kills all of us, then Tony's going to have to make some choices.
I don't think you can do that. I think they have to expire at the
Yeah,
beginning of the next.
but that's about where it's gotten to. I mean,
Right. It's perpetual, it seems.
yeah.
So, also declaration of local state emergency pursuant to 65 ILCS 5/11-1-6 and Village Ordinance number 2020-04-01 pursuant to authority vested in the office of the village president by the Illinois Municipal Code, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, section 3305/11, the ordinance 2020-04-01. The Village of Hennessy, I, Anthony Excel, the village president of the Village of Hennessy, do hereby declare that a local state of emergency exists as of this date, February 15, 22, and shall continue until such time as provided by ordinance 2020-04-01. We don't need a roll call on that. Let's see. I have one thing. I did get a letter from the Farmington Central Academic Foundation. Got it in the mail today. Thanking us for the previous $1,000 scholarships presented to the deserving seniors. I hope will continue our generosity. The awards night is April 28th, 2022 at the high school auditorium. If they have it in person, hopefully.
They didn't have it last year in person, did they? Yeah.
No, it was all virtual.
So did you virtually, or no, were you there then?
No.
No.
I don't think there was anything. I don't think Fred did anything for it. I think
Yeah.
the foundation does it. So, anything else to come before the board?
I saw a lot of love on social media for the guys after the last snowstorm, hitting the streets real well.
Yeah.
They worked all night one night.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
They
Like
did.
literally all night, right?
They came in at 11 and they finished like at 5:30.
I want to get out there and drive.
There was a lot of posts about how good of a
Yeah.
job they were doing.
I can take out here and watch it.
Yeah, I heard him go by at one point, and I was like, I forget why I woke up, but I heard something. I happened to be. I was like, oh boy, that's.
Well, they might be back out there again.
Yeah, they will be. Sounds like this will at least be during the day.
Next board meeting. No, next board meeting is March 1st, 2022. Already did correspondence. And anything else? We're adjourned.